channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are finally going to be making one of the creatures from ARK as a doll and not a painting. Now I do have a painting video that's going to be posted tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. But today we are going to be making the Managarmr as a art doll. So let's get started. Okay guys, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the pattern pieces. I'm going to show you how that all goes together. I'm going to get the fabric out and then we're going to start sewing the body. So from now on, I'm going to be referring to the Managarmr as a frost drake just to make it a little bit easier. So right here is our drake's body without the wings. I've got everything kind of drawn out for the neck, body, and tail. And what we're going to do with this pattern piece is half of this is going to be fur fabric and the other half is going to be another type of fabric that I'm going to use to kind of imitate the metally underbelly of the drake. So I'm going to take my pattern and I've already got it drawn out where I want the different fabric pieces to be, but right now I need to cut my pattern into different pieces so we can start cutting our fabric out with it. So I'm going to roughly have it like this, where the top of the neck, body, and the upper part of the leg is going to be fur fabric, and then the other part of the body, all the lower bits, are going to be a different type of fabric. So the other pattern pieces you're going to need is you're going to need a belly piece. I've got it roughly drawn out to where it'll be a little bit wider around the chest, and then you're also going to need a strip of fabric to go down the back of the dragon. And then I have this little tiny piece here to help me make a little tuft of fur at the end of the tail. And then for the wing, I have it broken up into two different parts, where the main part of the wing, kind of where all the bones and different joints and stuff would be, is going to be fur fabric. I'm of course going to shave it down so it's not so fluffy, and then the webbing of the wing is going to be a different type of fabric. So for this piece, I'm going to be using 3 different types of fabrics for the body. I'm going to be using this really pretty blue fabric for the top. And then for the underbelly, I'm going to be using this really cool fabric that I found. It's supposed to look like black roses, but I'm going to use it to make it look like cables and different types of metally pieces on the underbelly. And then lastly, I'm going to use this sequence fabric to make a scaling effect on the sides of the drake. Okay, we have all of our fabric pieces cut out and I'm going to start putting everything together. So I'm going to start with the sides of the drake first. I've got all the different fabric pieces cut out for it, and we're going to just sew all of these together to create one left and one right. After that, I'm going to take the pieces for the lower parts of the back legs and I'm going to sew those on as well. Now I'm going to take the inside parts of the legs and I'm going to sew down the front of those, connecting them to the left and right of the body. Like most of my pieces that have a wire frame, we're going to leave the back of the leg open so we can put it on the frame later. Now I'm going to take the belly piece and I'm going to sew this in between the left and right of the body. So we're going to connect everything together. After that, I need to add the tuft of fur to the end of the tail. So I'm just going to sew these right onto the tip of the tail. Now we're going to start on the wings. So I'm going to start with the webbing of the wings, and basically I've already dyed this to create a cool effect, but what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sew the 2 layers of the wing together. If you're wondering on what type of fabric that I'm using for the webbing of the wing, it's very similar to either bed sheets or a pillowcase. As you can see, I have fabric for each wing. I've got 2 layers and I'm just going to sew around this. The top of the webbing is going to be left open so we can flip it right side out. So we're just going to sew down the very bottom portion of the wing. After I've sewn that, I'm going to cut off all my extra fabric and flip it right side out. I'm going to use my sewing machine again and I'm just going to go down the portion of the wing where the finger pieces would be. Okay, now we can add the webbing to the wings. So what we're going to do is we're going to sandwich the webbing in between the 2 layers of the wing, and we're going to end up sewing this together. Okay, everything is together and you notice the very top is open, and we're going to leave that open until we add it to the wire frame. So for right now, that's all the sewing that we're going to do until we put everything together. So I'm going to move on to making the clay pieces. So for the clay pieces, you're going to need to make the head, of course, and then the 2 back legs, so we don't have a whole lot of pieces to make. I'm going to start with the face first. So I'm going to take a lump of tin foil. This is going to be the base that we're going to work with, and I'm going to completely cover this in a thick layer of clay. I'm going to smooth it out and get it into a rough shape of what I want the face to look like, and then we can start adding the details to it. So our drake has this really cool headpiece on the very front, so I want to really focus on that. And the headpiece kind of transitions into what I believe are ears, even though they look like horns. So I'm going to add a little bit more wiring to the very top of the head, that way we have a little bit of a frame to build those ears on. So I'm just going to push that in and I'm going to start covering the wiring. After we have all that covered, I'm going to start adding the eyes to the piece. So I'm just going to decide where those eyes are supposed to go, add little balls of clay for those, and then make some eyelids around that with some strips of clay. We're going to start blending all of that together and start using our tools to add some more detail to it. Now I'm going to take one of my tools and I'm going to start outlining the shape of the headpiece. So I'm just going to kind of create a little line work. I'm going to make sure it's nice and even, and then I'm going to use my tools to kind of define this a bit more. Now I do need to go around the eyes a little bit because the headpiece is similar to how a helmet is, so the eyes are not really connected to this portion, it's just kind of resting over the eyes. So I'm going to go over that and kind of create more of a helmet look around the eyes. After I have the basic layout of the headpiece, I'm going to start adding the details to it. Now remember, this is supposed to look like metal, so you're not going for scales or anything, you're kind of going for like line works and different kind of like indents and stuff like that. Once I'm happy with the top of the head, I'm going to move on to making the mouth. So I'm going to add little balls of clay to the very top of the mouth, and I'm going to use these for the upper cheeks. I'm going to blend this into the face, and I'm going to start using my tools to make the opening of the mouth. Now again, this portion of the face is going to be furred, so I don't need to add a whole lot of detail. I mainly want to focus on the shape of it. Once I'm done, I'm going to put this in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45 minutes. Now we're going to start on the back legs. So I've already got a wireframe set up, and I'm going to start building my clay on top of this. So I'm going to start with the claws. I'm going to get those shaped up, and I'm going to pre-bake these for probably 20 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit, and then I'm going to start working on the bottoms of the feet. So for the bottom of the legs, we're just going to start adding clay to these wires. So I'm going to use some strips of clay, I'm going to lay everything out, and I'm also going to use some balls of clay to kind of add a little bit more girth at the tips of the toes, just to give it a bit more shape. We don't want our toes to look just like noodles or anything, we want to give them a bit more dimension. After I have that done, I'm going to keep going up the back of the leg. So I'm just going to cover that in clay, and we are going to add a little bit of detail to this. One thing that's really cool about this drake is it has like these little jet boosters on the back legs. So I'm going to create some like metally tube bits, and then I'm going to kind of push in to create a hole or an opening where a jet would be. Because remember, our frost drake is part machine, so we're going to try and keep this kind of cord-like or metal-like. We're not going for scales or anything like that. Once I'm happy with the little boosters on the back of the legs, I'm going to bake these again for another 20 minutes to save my progress, and then I'm going to start on the tops of the feet. For the tops of the feet, it's very similar to how we did the bottom. We're just going to take strips of clay and start covering up our frame, and we're going to use our tools to kind of blend this into the previous layer of clay. Now normally when I cover up the tops of the feet, I kind of blend everything together, make it nice and smooth. Well, with this, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep my strips of clay separate, and I'm actually going to use my tools to kind of define them more. Once I'm happy with how the feet look, I'm going to put these in the oven for one final bake at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45 minutes. Once all of our clay pieces are done baking and have cooled to touch, we can start painting them. Okay, so for our painting, I think I'm going to start with the feet first, and I'm going to be primering them a black color. I'm going to go over them a few times to make sure to get them as dark as possible, and then if I want to, I can lighten up the more raised portions to create kind of a shadowing effect. Now one thing that's really cool about the underside of the drake is that it has these like blue lights in between the cables and stuff, so I'm going to try and create that on the feet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to paint the portions that I want blue white first, because we're painting on top of a black, and if I don't do that, they're going to be very dull. So to make the blue look really bright, we're going to paint in the portions that we want first white, let that dry, and then go over that with the blue. So I'm going to do a little bit of this on the top of the feet, and I'm also going to do this to the inside portions of the jets on the back of the feet. Lastly, I want to paint the claws a nice metallic color, so I'm just going to go over this with a silver modeling paint. Okay, now I'm going to be painting the face. Now remember, half of the face is going to be furred, but I'm still going to paint that portion so none of the white peeks through the fur that we add later. So I'm going to be primering the top of the head the color that I want the headpiece to be, and then the bottom is going to be the same color as that fur fabric. Once that's dried, I can start adding detail to it. So I'm going to start with some white highlights for the very top of the head. I'm then going to start adding some details to the nose and the eyes, so I mainly want to darken these up and create a nice shadowing effect. And then for the eye itself, I decided that I wanted to have purple eyes for this. I thought it would look cool. Once I've added all the little details that I wanted, I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to take all of our clay pieces that we have painted, and I'm going to go over them with a nice layer of resin. We're going to let that dry overnight, and then we can start putting our drake together. Okay, so I have a very simple wire frame that I already have put together. I'm going to start adding the clay pieces to it and the fabric for the body. So we're going to start by adding the clay feet to the very bottom. So I'm going to use some thinner gauged wire, and I'm going to start wrapping those onto the backs of the legs. Then I'm going to take our fabric body that we sewed earlier, and I'm going to run the legs through that, and we're going to start connecting everything to those legs. So I'm going to take a little bit of E6000 glue and some hot glue, and I'm going to start gluing the fabric for the legs around the base of the foot. We're going to let those dry for a little bit, and then we can sew up the back of the leg and stuff it. After we're done with the legs, we can move on to adding the wings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew up the very top of the wing to close it off and create a nice tube at the very top of the wing, and we're going to run our wire for the wing right through that. Once we have that in place, we can sew our wing onto the body. We're going to do this to both sides. Next, we're going to take our head and we're going to glue that onto the wire for the neck. And then we're going to take the fabric for the neck and we're going to glue it around the base of the head. Lastly, we're going to take the strip of fabric for the back of the dragon and we're going to start sewing the back of the dragon closed. As we're doing this, we're going to make sure to stuff the rest of the body. Okay, our body is basically all put together, but we need to start adding details to it, shaving it down, and start adding the scale work to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my scissors and I'm going to start cutting off bits of the extra fur where I want the fur to be short. Once I have most of the fur out of the way, I'm going to go over this with a hair trimmer to kind of make everything nice and smooth. After we have our fur fabric shaved down where we want it, we can start adding that sequenced fabric to the sides of the drake to add scales. So I have little bits already cut out and I'm just going to start sewing them into place. Okay, the body of the dragon is basically done. Now we just need to fur the face of the dragon. So I'm going to take my E6000 glue again and we're going to start covering the face in glue. Then we're going to take fur trimmings that match the body of the dragon and we're going to start pushing that into the glue. We're going to make sure everything is completely covered and we're going to let this dry. Once the fur is dried into place, we can add a little bit of a highlight and stuff with our paints, and then we can also add a little bit of this to the body of the dragon if we want to do that as well. I kind of felt like adding a bit of purple to the back of the dragon. Okay guys, and that's how I made the Managarmr from ARK Extinction. I'm going to have him along with a bunch of other creatures in my Etsy shop, so check the links down below if you want to buy anything. Also, tomorrow we're going to be posting another painting video, so keep an eye out for that. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!